Hey, got some words of warning for you about a little industry called Big Tobacco. Why? Because they're targeting us. We've been through a lot, all kinds of climate crises, a global pandemic, and 3 economic recessions. That's wild. You know what else is wild? That while millions of people were losing their homes, lives, and livelihoods, someone else was making bank of all that suffering and misery. Big Tobacco. I'm a little heated, and you should be too. Here's the facts. Those sustainability cleanups don't even dent the pollution they cause. We are facing climate catastrophe. And here's Big Tobacco cutting down 600 million trees every year to grow the stuff that'll kill over 8 million people. Never mind the 84 million tons of CO2 emissions created to produce it. Oh, and Big Tobacco helping people, being responsible with how they source and sell their product. Why don't we check in with the farmers they've exploited, the minority groups they've targeted, the kids they're marketing to? Yeah, they're pushing this stuff to kids. You've heard of e-cigarettes, nicotine pouches, vapes with fruity new flavors. How about 5-year-olds heading to the ER because they got their hands on a vape at school? You think they care? I'll let them say it themselves. Smoking e-cigarettes is totally safe. The base of our business is the high school student. Young adult smokers are the only source of replacement smokers. We don't smoke that, we just sell it. We reserve the right to smoke for the young. We're done with the lies. We won't let them win. So you can leave this where it is, or you can step in, stand up, use your voice, and say no to Big Tobacco.
Buenos días a todos y todas. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a nuestro webinar Experiencias y Estrategias Innovadoras para Proteger a la Niñez y Juventud del Marketing de las Tabacaleras. Este webinar es organizado en conjunto por la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids y Corporate Accountability. Mi nombre es Diana Cerón Díaz. Yo trabajo en el equipo de control de tabaco de la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, en la sede basada en Washington, D.C. En esta mañana quisiéramos...
This morning we would like, first of all, to welcome you and also start with some important messages. First of all, to let you know that this webinar is organized in the framework of the World No Tobacco Day 2024 campaign. This year's campaign is focused on protecting children from the interference of tobacco industry. Next, please. First of all, I would like to let you know that this session is being recorded, and this webinar has simultaneous interpretation into English, Spanish, and Portuguese. You can find the interpretation icon in the form of a little globe, terrestrial globe. It's in the lower part of your screen. And if you're having any difficulties to access your sound, maybe you could update your Zoom application to avoid any technical issues. Throughout this training, we will not have the possibility of asking live questions, but we have a Q&A box available below in the application menu bar. And in that Q&A, you can write down any questions you have for our panelists and our guests, and also any messages as to the logistics of this webinar. Please feel free to put any messages on our chat. Thank you very much. We will start now with a few welcome words to the webinar. And on behalf of PAHO, we have a message from the director, Dr. Jarbas Barbosa. Please, could you upload the video? Today, May 31st, we celebrate the World No Tobacco Day under the motto, protect children from the interference of tobacco industry. Tobacco use and nicotine addiction continue to be a public health threat in all the world, with more than 8 million people dying every year as the effect of tobacco. Additionally, tobacco use has harmful effects on the environment, the economy, and childhood work. PAHO urges to fight against the tobacco strategies and other industries to attack especially those marketing tactics addressed to children and youth. This includes promotional actions in traditional media, in digital communication platforms such as the social media, taking into advantage the great diffusion capability of these spaces. The tobacco strategies also include strategies referred to the product itself through flavors and smells, and the sponsorship of educational, sports, or cultural activity. For example, in Mexico, tobacco industry advertise electronic cigarettes in the social media on the occasion of the FIFA World Cup, despite the prohibition in that respect. In Jamaica, the tobacco industry offers scholarships and other perks that reveals the challenges faced by the countries to combat the tobacco marketing. WHO warns that the Americas region will not reach the relative 30% reduction of tobacco use by 2025 because there's a prevalence in electronic cigarettes among youth. All of these figures are very alarming and very close to the use of traditional cigarettes. And we are talking about people of less than 15 years of age. So we should combat the prevalence of e-cigarettes and normal cigarettes. Just a few weeks ago, the Colombian Congress approved the prohibition of publicity, promotion, and sponsorship of conventional tobacco products, electronic cigarettes, and other tobacco products. Brazil recently approved the prohibition of the marketing and use of these products since 2019. PAHO also protects children from the interference in the tobacco industries to urge all member states of PAHO to adopt a comprehensive approach to tobacco control and nicotine addiction by counter-arresting the manipulative practices of the industry. That will allow us to create a better and tobacco-free world for future generations. Good morning, everybody. I'm Rosa Sandoval, Regional Advisor for Tobacco Control of PAHO. I would like to start greeting the more than 350 individuals here in Zoom, and many are following our webinar through YouTube. So thank you for being with us here. Every year, PAHO recognizes individuals or organizations that have made strides in tobacco control within the framework of CMCT, of FCTC. The winners of the prize in the Americas this year that you can see here are individuals and organizations that have made exceptional contributions since 2023 to tobacco control. We are proud that different individuals, as OSCs, CSOs, and others from different countries of our region have been recognized by WHO with the prize of World No Tobacco Day 2024. Vera da Costa y Silva, one of the world pioneers in promoting tobacco control since the 1980s, with a standout paper role to negotiate WHO FCTC in Portuguese in Brazil. She has been the head of the Secretariat of the WHO FCTC and an official of WHO and PAHO. I have had the pleasure to work reporting to her in the constant fight against the tobacco epidemic. Gustavo Soñora. Gustavo has been a great voice advocating for tobacco control to prevail over corporate interest. He started in Uruguay, his native country, where he led the League to Tobacco Control in 2008. Later, he had different roles at a regional or global level. He's a reference point in our region that has been key in promoting the tobacco control agenda in our region. Carolina Giraldo Botero. She started in Colombia in 2022, and since then she has been steadfast in the efforts to promote national action to protect childhood from the tobacco industry. She advocated the implementation of a tobacco tax during the tax reform in 2022, and she took decisive measures to address these prevalent policies. Red Papás, it's an organization committed to the welfare of children and adolescents through tobacco control. Through its educational network, it launched an in-line activity, and it urged the Colombian Congress to approve a bill for tobacco control. And as our director just said, after 2 years of deliberations, that law was approved in Colombia in May of this year. Yanela Severini. She created a network of activist youth in Latin America dedicated to tobacco control and human rights. Her efforts have empowered the youth and to implement a platform to involve governors, civil society, and academia to promote tobacco control policies. In the last 2 years, she has become key in legal measures against tobacco in Latin America. Alberto José de Araujo and Antonio Pedro Mira, both in memoriam, they pioneered the tobacco control movement in their native country, Brazil. They had a standout role in tobacco control within the Medical Brazilian Association in the 1980s. They both chaired the Commission Against Tobacco, and their efforts opened the way to the first tobacco control effort in Brazil in 1985. And Dr. Araujo created a study center that it is now the reference point in the country. Dr. Mira founded and directed the Sao Paulo Cancer Registry and led different activities as a teacher of the public health school in the University of Sao Paulo. Please join me in congratulating them and thanking them for all their dedication and support. Now I would like to invite my colleague and friend, Patricia Sosa, Director for Latin America and Caribbean, to give us some welcoming words. I am really excited. I see there are almost 385 participants at that webinar and many more through Facebook. So this is a great success. Good morning. I know many of you, but for those who don't know me, I'm Patricia Sosa. I'm the director for Latin America and the Caribbean for the Tobacco Free Children campaign. It's an honor to speak here with PAHO and to promote accountability in the framework of the World No Tobacco Day. This year's motto, protect children and youth from tobacco marketing. This is fundamental. From our beginning in 1996, I started with them in 1996. So since 1996, we have committed to protect the future of boys, girls, and youth, fighting against the misleading tobacco industry tactics. I would like to thank sincerely PAHO for inviting us to organize this significant activity for our region. This webinar will give us the opportunity to share ideas and to learn from our different experiences of those presenters and give strides towards a healthier and tobacco-free world. Today, more than ever, it's vital to join efforts and share innovative strategies to fight against the tobacco practices. We face a global challenge, but also as a unique opportunity to protect the health and well-being of our communities. Thank you very much for your attention and your commitment to tobacco control and public health. Thank you very much, Patricia and Rosa. I am Patricia Gutkowski. I work with Patricia Sosa. I am the communication coordinator for Latin America. It's a pleasure to greet everybody today. I don't see the screen. Thank you. I will mention the objectives of this webinar. What we want to do with these webinars is share the tobacco industry strategies to interfere with tobacco control policies, especially those targeting children and youth. We also want to promote the participation of youth in the region to join in the fight against tobacco industry and to share the guidelines that has recently approved by the COP of the FCTC as to the representation of tobacco in entertainment networks. We look thereby to strengthen the technical capabilities of our members and of civil society also. The target audience of this webinar, well, it's government delegates, WHO, FCTC, or tobacco control focal points, representatives of the international cooperation, and other entities. I will address quickly the agenda to move to the first presentation. We will have two panels. First of all, three presentations. First of all, we will hear a presentation about the strategies of the tobacco industry geared to new generations, such as music festivals and CSR events for youth. There will be a second presentation about actions by youth in the Americas, CREA, to counter the interference of the tobacco industry. And then we will have a presentation of specific guidelines on Article 13 of the WHO FCTC. After this panel, there will be an international panel about challenges and opportunities to counteract tobacco industry strategies targeting children and youth, where we will learn about the experiences and vision of representatives from Brazil, Colombia, and the Caribbean. And as Diana said at the beginning, you can use the Q&A box to write down questions for the panelists, which we will then try to respond. To complete the webinar, we will have some closing words about PAHO and corporate accountability. Our speakers and our panelists, we have already met Diana, Rosa, and Patricia. Daniel will also accompany us with the moderation. In the first panel, we will have Daniel Dorado from Corporate Accountability, Naib Jalea from Korea, and Patrick Musavulu, Secretary of the WHO FCTC. The second panel will have Carlos Jimenez from Colombia, Carolina Giraldo Botera, and Andrés Luis Oliveira da Silva from Anvisa, Brazil. Without further ado, we will move to our first panel. We will introduce our first panelist, Daniel Dolado, Colombian lawyer by the Javeriana University, Director of Public Policies for Tobacco Control in Corporate Accountability, and he's co-coordinator for LAC of the Global Tobacco Control Alliance. Daniel, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Patricia. It's a pleasure to be here with all of us today, with all of you today. And introduce corporate accountability and its support of the tobacco control campaign. Let me share my screen. I hope you can see the campaign, the slide. We have been invited to share in 10 minutes this very interesting theme. This is very exciting for corporate accountability because in this webinar, we will submit a report documenting 3 years of actions and one of the largest, maybe, Tobacco Corporation and its action in music festivals to promote its own tobacco products in one of our region's countries. Under this theme, we will focus the interference strategies focused on new generations and through CSR festivals. First of all, neither I nor the organization I belong receive any type of contribution or financial support or another type of support from the tobacco industry. And we have been working on tobacco control for about 30 years, and we are focusing on transnational companies all over the world to reveal all their actions to reduce our democracy and contaminate, pollute our planet, and really against saving lives. To focus in the 2 topics of this presentation, I have brought here 3 main images. 1, control to the WHO FCTC, and 2, about the guidelines for the applications of 2 regular articles. First of all, Article 5.3 that referred basically to tools to prevent any conflicts of interest with the tobacco industry, and also very specifically guidelines about Article 13, especially focusing on publicity, promotion, and sponsorship. We will hear more about this later. In cross-border publicity, why have we focused in this? We already saw in the initial video with this pretty woman exposed all these abuses from the tobacco industry, and also the words of Dr. Harbas in his introductory video. The tobacco industry continues to really work to increase its market as a transnational company. And so it expands its market, focusing and targeting the youth and children, and they invest huge sums of money to capture, so to speak, this population segment. And having said this, what Article 5.3 and 13 require, we will present real example of how the industry continues making efforts to attract these groups. And it is with great pride that today we are presenting to you this monitoring report. I understand that as I go on in my presentation, I will present in the chat certain resources that you can download. This is a report topic called Publicity, Promotion and Sponsorship Strategies, PPP, of tobacco products implemented by Philip Morris International, PMI, in Colombia. This report documents the tactics that the industry continues implementing. One, to leave a very clear message, the business of the tobacco industry continues to be the sale of traditional cigarettes. This is one of the key data. I will not delve into details of the report for time reasons, but this specific example includes information to reveal that, for example, the global market, the Marlboro branch increased from 9.2% to 9.8% its presence in the world. For many of you, this message may be familiar coming from the industry that it tries to issue through its marketing strategies. For example, they pretend to provide options to adult smokers, but other issues that we will see now in the slide is how, for example, in this type of music festival, the tobacco industry is emphatic in addressing PPP tactics addressed to youth.
Also, they do not only during the festival, but outside the musical festivals. So for that reason, we will be recapping some of the main images of this report from 2022 to 2024, as I mentioned before. And for many of us, or for many of you, this may be familiar. We see in the 2022 version, we have stands with very bright colors, and then they show the different cigarette boxes and the price. And then during the images taken in 2023, we see these models of advertising outside the main festivals, and they have elements that facilitate the purchase of all of these cigarette boxes with very appealing messages. And then we have brought this to Colombia as an example. But this is happening in other musical festivals in the region. But Colombia is one of the countries of the region that has total ban on tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. So we ask how a festival like this is one of the main sponsors of the tobacco industry, such as Philip Morris International. Also, the music festivals target the young people, and they attract young people. But then the tobacco industries show this type of behavior to attract new consumers among young people. So we invite you to consult these reports to make sure that you know what are the findings. And we know that there's a problem here. And as we see in the conclusions and recommendations slide, we will be able to recommend some steps to advance in this effort. The second topic, and with this, I'm getting close to finishing. The second slide has to do with the tactics documented in civil society about the exponential growth of the tobacco industry, and it has to do with the corporate accountability and the corporate social responsibility of the tobacco industry. This is another important input, and together with the government or World Center for control of tobacco industry. We prepared a report towards the end of last year, and this was relaunched during the Conference of the Parts in February of this year. And then the chart that we see here on the screen, show how the presence of these actions has advanced up to 2023. This is a part of the report where we document the efforts of the civil society and how we can document the interference strategies and what we are doing to implement the clauses of Article 5.3. We have the coordination of 18 countries in the region. And here we see some specific examples. And we show what was documented in the report in 2021. We see examples from Brazil, Guatemala, Colombia, Dominican Republic, just to give you more examples of countries outside, in addition to Colombia. And two of the main tobacco industries support campaigns targeting the youth, and they offer scholarships, for instance, to study agriculture. And as we see, there is an incursion, which is quite strong, of the tobacco industry because they want to clean their image. They want to give a false image of themselves. And we have to know that these products cause 8 million people, around 8 million people deaths per year. So we see a concrete example here of how these tactics are related to tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, but also we see campaigns, for instance, like campaigns that Bogota is not an ashtray. We had that campaign, Bogota is not an ashtray. And so we just talked about how people who are consumers of Marlboro cigarettes and then all the pollution they cause. So this campaign is part of all the collaborating efforts. But we see evidence, constantly see evidence of all the efforts of the tobacco industry to continue to position themselves in a positive image, especially when it comes to environmental topics. And with this, we go to the end of my presentation with conclusions and recommendations. The first message is that we want to insist upon that the manufacture and sale of cigarettes continues to be the main business activity of the tobacco industry, especially Marlboro cigarettes. And in the last assembly of Philip Morris International, they said they sold about 5 trillion cigarettes. So this is the paradox of the serpent that bites its own tail. So we see that we are fighting for a world without tobacco. And on the other hand, we have these efforts of the industry. Of course, there are many contradictions of the tobacco industry. In the festivals, we have seen this. It is clear that the tobacco industry is a corporation, is a for-profit industry. It's not an NGO, it's not a charity organization. And all the strategies want to attract children and youth to increase their sales. They want to have more profit. And this attends against the life and the health of people. So we want to make sure that the countries that already have a complete ban on tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, we want to tell them we have to make sure that we are aware of the sponsorship relations that they try to open, that the tobacco industry tries to open, not only in the countries that have ratified the Framework Convention, but in other countries. And also, we have to think that the directives, the guidelines of the Framework Convention demands an integrated effort from governments and civil society, intergovernmental organizations. But also, we want to make sure that there is a message. Tobacco industry is very skilled in negotiations. And they want to have a constant presence in the United Nations negotiations and treaties. For instance, when it comes to contamination with plastics. And then the tobacco industry insists, along with other corporations from the region, to make sure that standards are set at a low level. So it is the time, and the time has come to tell the tobacco industry, you are responsible of abuse. So we are here. We will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much for your presentation. Yes, I want to remind everybody, if you want to have any questions, please go to the Q&A section. Now, it is my pleasure to present Najib Chalela, Colombian attorney, specialist in human rights, especially in health rights. He has graduated from Georgetown. He has worked with the civil society in Colombia and a consultant to PAHO in Colombia, is a member of the CREA network. And then he will be talking about the actions by youth in the Americas to counteract tobacco industry interference. Thank you so much, Patricia. Let me see if I can find my presentation. Okay, good morning, everybody. I am Najib Chalela. I am part of the CREA network. And first of all, I would like to thank PAHO and the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, and also to the other members of corporate accountability for allow us to work on this as a group to fight interference of tobacco industry in the region. Also, it is important to thank the fact, to be grateful for the fact that the World No Tobacco Day has led to the generation of a report on the interference and the effects of the tobacco industry in youth and children. This webinar targets children because children and youth are the groups found as by the tobacco industry as their main targets and consumers. So I would like to tell you what CREA is. CREA is a network of professional youth who are activists in Latin America, and we're all united through the commitment of promoting human rights in children and adolescents and young people to make sure that we have healthier environments in our region. And we want to make sure that we give a fresh look at the problems that youth face, especially in these special topics that are particularly important to all of us. There are many topics related to human rights and health, and this is one of the topics that has impacted us the most. And we want to counteract the effects of the tobacco industry in young people in our countries and the countries that we represent. And we are the main target of the tobacco industry. And for this reason, we believe that young people have to speak up against this industry. So with this, I'll tell you that we have been participating in several activities since we established CREA 2 years ago. We have been working hard to find actions to counteract the effects of this industry. First of all, we, as CREA, participated in COP10 in February, 5 of our members were in Panama during COP10, and they participated in the different discussion fora to make sure that the voice of the Latin American youth was heard there to express their concerns and our concerns about the industry, the tobacco industry, and also the application of the Framework Convention. Also, we have been working with governments and social society, the civil society organizations. We had several activities that had a lot of impact. First of all, we mobilized a group outside the convention center where the event was taking place, and CREA and other organizations prepare posters to show their disagreement with the tobacco industry, and then so that we would advocate for public policy implementation. And then also we wanted to gather other organizations targeting the youth and advocating for the rights of the youth. And we talked about different creative environments so that we would give incentives to the young people to participate in their efforts to combat the tobacco industry. We prepare contents that were targeting the youth. For instance, things that were in, quote unquote, in different youth groups. And then also we underline the lies of the tobacco industry and how our efforts, serious efforts, are advancing to combat the effects of the industry, because they are trying to capture us. They're trying to groom us to use tobacco. So we have been working with other organizations around the world, and we prepared a declaration to present to the Framework Convention Secretariat, showing points that were the most important for all of us, that were, first of all, the tobacco industry it creates harm, causes harm, and then tobacco not only is harmful for the environment, but also the tobacco industry is trying to groom and capture children as consumers. So these were the topics that were of most concern to us, and this is what we wanted to include in the declaration that was delivered to the Secretariat of the Framework Convention. February was a very busy month for all of us, because after COP10, many of our participants went to Mexico City to participate together with other 50 organizations in the leadership convention held by Johns Hopkins in Mexico in February and March. So this is a program that aims to train the participants in order to improve and advance in the development of tobacco control policies. So the participants of CREA work in groups with other youth to facilitate the application and implementation of all of these policies, not only with Hopkins, but with other organizations, and to create alliances in the region to be able to face the tobacco industry. And CREA had the opportunity to share all the content that we have published in the networks and the social media. And we have shown the contents that are prepared by youth for youth. And there were many lessons learned in tobacco control. And here we also attended the Lima Summit in April and May. We participated with Tobacco Free Kids and CREA, and we had 28 youth from different areas of the region with different profiles. Some of them were from CREA, others were not, but we met in Lima to train and to learn about topics of incidents of tobacco industry interference, how to work with tobacco control policies, and how to control the interference of this industry in youth. This week, we had different people who are training others under the work of Tobacco Free Kids with the guests from Peru who were telling us about their own experiences, and also people from other countries talking about specific topics. And this was very enriching for all of our members and for CREA, because this gives us the opportunity of have different panels to narrate our experiences and then to talk about training so that all the participants could learn better about strategies and practices as to how create impact in spaces where we can have training, how to be more effective activists, and how to work as decision makers. So the most important thing is that we were able to meet with many activists from the region, and we had a very practical event, and 28 youth from the participants in the Peruvian Congress, we went to talk about this with decision makers. And we contacted those people who are working on tobacco control in the country, and we had the opportunity to share the experiences of youth from many countries and to tell the decision makers how the tobacco control is working in the different countries, and also what are the topics of most important to us as far as the industry interference is concerned, and how we can better protect the health of the young people. So with this, we recruited youth from other countries that are not part of CREA, and we are making plans to develop joint actions throughout the region. But also, what this has taught us is that there is a possibility to share this not only in Lima, and in other areas we can increase our presence and increase the number of members of our CREA network. So we all have different points of view around the country, the region, and around the world. And when we join our efforts, when we join our experiences from different countries, we can have a wider impact. And so it is important for young people to be the actors in these tobacco control activities. And we hope that we can expand much more, and perhaps someday, at some point in our life, we will see the dream come true of having a community in all of our area totally tobacco free. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nayef, for your excellent presentation. Now that we have seen how the industry interferes with the strategies that they target children and adolescents, we see the actions of the young people, and now to know how the governments can protect children and young people and adolescents through the strategies of the industry. I will introduce Patrick Musabuli.
Patrick is the technical officer at the Secretariat of the WHO FCTC. He actually coordinated the work of the working group responsible for developing the specific guidelines on cross-border tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship that were approved under the framework of the recent COP10. So Patrick, welcome for your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Diana, for the opportunity for inviting the Convention Secretariat to this very important webinar. So I've been introduced, so I will go straight. My job today is to give you an overview of the specific guidelines to address cross-border tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, and the depiction of tobacco in entertainment media for the implementation of Article 13 of the WHO FCTC. You can see that it's long, so I will be referring to these specific guidelines as just specific guidelines to address cross-border TAPs. Yes, as my colleague just said, it was as Naib just from CREA just said, my boss, the head of the Convention Secretariat, Dr. Adriana Blanco Marquizo, has had the opportunity to meet with the youth during COP10 in Panama. And it was really good also to see that during COP10, the youth was able to deliver a statement calling upon parties to protect future generation from devastating consequences of the manipulative practice of tobacco and the related tobacco industries. I think it's really important for us to have more young people creating a strong generation of tobacco control advocates. So I just wanted to show this picture to show you that, of course, the head of the Secretariat met with the youth during COP. So during that same COP, as some of the colleagues have just have said, parties were able to agree on the text of the specific guideline to address cross-border taps, and I'm going to give you a summary of what is contained in each of these each section of these specific guidelines to address cross-border taps. So we have, first of all, the introduction, and in the introduction, it's very simple. It's just the introduction just reminds parties that the WHO FCTC obliged them to undertake a comprehensive ban on all tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. We also have a reminder, the definition of the tobacco advertising and promotion and tobacco sponsorship as they are in the WHO FCTC under Article 1. So we can see that tobacco advertising and promotion is defined as any form of commercial communication, recommendation, or action with the aim or effect, effect, or likely effect of promoting tobacco products or tobacco use either directly or indirectly. It's also important to note when you go through these guidelines in the introduction, you will, there is a reminder of the history. In 2008, the third session of the Conference of the Party adopted the guidelines for the implementation of Article 13. But at that time, since that time, things have evolved completely. We have now cross-border digital entertainment media that has expanded, including through wider internet access, social media, smartphone use, and access to digital video films. We also have novel and emerging tobacco products market that have also expanded. So the purpose of these guidelines is really to supplement the existing guidelines that I've just mentioned that were adopted at COP3 in Durban, South Africa, and further provide support to parties in meeting the obligation under Article 13. It's also provide guidance on how effectively and comprehensively ban on or restrict taps in light of increasing use of cross-border channels in digital media. It's very, very important. And this, during the working group and even at COP, it was very, very clear that these specific guidelines should be applied in addition to and not in any way substitute or replace the existing guidelines. So for the implementation of Article 13, we have an additional tool. We used to have guidelines, now we have specific guidelines. Moving on to the principles and application of these guidelines, it's important to highlight the fact that the effectiveness of effort to eliminate cross-border taps depends first on the comprehensiveness of taps ban or restriction, depending on the constitution of each party. So enforcement is also something really key, and it is really, really very well highlighted in the guidelines. International cooperation is also something very, very important that needs to be taken into consideration. The role of the civil society has also been highlighted in the specific guidelines. And we can see that the civil society has a crucial role in ensuring that TAPS measures are adequately implemented and enforced. And we need to make sure that the NGO, civil society involved in this process do not have any conflict of interest with the tobacco industry. When you go also through these specific guidelines, you will see that parties really discuss and agree that the digital media communication platform also have a role to play, and it's really important to engage with those industry just to make sure that digital media communication platform remove, for instance, any tabs that we can see on this platform. Moving on to the recommendation, there are so many recommendations, but I will go straight to a few of them. I think the first one, which is really important, is that a comprehensive ban or restriction on tabs should be applied to all media types. We know that it used to be applied only on television, radio, newspaper, but it's important now when parties are developing their legislation, regulation, or administrative measure, they should really also include digital media platform. It is also important to highlight this recommendation stating that parties need to work collaboratively and systematically to monitor, identify, remove, or prevent any cross-border tabs. I think that is really key. Continuing with the recommendation, as I was saying, it's really important, and this was something that parties really discussed. It's really important to consult or work with media industry to reduce depiction in entertainment media. We just received some good news from Nigeria, a country in the African region. They have been able to discuss with media industry to remove tabs in the media. All those actors involved in Nollywood, as you know, Nigeria in Africa is one of the countries that produce a lot of films spread and that I've seen in the region. So they have been able, the government have been able to discuss with the media industry, and there is a regulation that will allow to just remove any form of tabs. Parties should require, this is another recommendation, parties should require digital media communication platform to apply and enforce existing tabs. And it's really important, and this was one of also one of the recommendations, it's really important for parties to ensure that comprehensive tabs bans and the enforcement are an integral part of any efforts to protect young people online and promote a safer internet. So it's when parties are developing, any legislation, any regulation related to young people, this is something that should be taken into consideration. Moving on to the monitoring and enforcement section, I think that it's very clear that for effective enforcement of tabs ban, it's really important to have proportionate and dissuasive penalties. So this is something that also parties need to take into consideration when developing, legislation, regulations, and measure to ban or restrict tabs. And something also very important where not already in place, parties should think about designating a competent and independent authority to monitor and enforce the legislation. Again, here, the civil society has a role to play in monitoring and enforcement, and it was very, very clearly put in these guidelines. Particular obligation should be imposed on content hosts to identify and remove tabs. This is something that I said, and research also is important. It's important to continue to follow up to get as many as possible evidence. We have already so many evidence, but we need to continue to show that the tobacco industry is using different tab strategies to target particularly youth. Yeah. So one of the, I think it's the last section of these guidelines. They are not very long, but we parties were wanted to add an appendix, which is not, I must say, it's not, it's just an indicative list. It's not an exhaustive list. This appendix is an indicative list illustrating form of cross-border tabs in digital media communication platform and the depiction of tobacco in the entertainment media. You can see, for instance, one influencer on that picture promoting tobacco products, but in the list you also have paid advertisements. You have commercial promotion of posts by consumers of their own tobacco usage, product integration, sponsored news and infotainment, films, movies, television, streaming content, streaming television programs, so video, computer games, smartphone application. So these are, this is all these examples are in the appendix of the specific guidelines that were adopted at COP10 by parties. To sum up, we need to know that it's important to protect youth, and this was these are some of the material that we use to celebrate World No Tobacco Day. We know that the tobacco industry is advertising to youth in ways that are difficult to detect, but highly effective in capturing a new audience online and across border. Parties need to take measures to protect the next generation by opposing harmful advertising, including by developing and implementing laws, regulations that prohibit cross-border and digital tobacco advertising. They need to monitor and they need to engage with those media companies. Government need to really implement these guidelines that are available for them to use. Allow me to share also some those material I was mentioning that we were able to, that we developed as the Convention Secretariat for World No Tobacco Day. But there is also this publication on your left, developed by, prepared by WHO, which is really, really important, restricting digital marketing, that I would suggest you to read. And there will be some webinars where we will have more details on that. So basically, this is what I wanted to share with you on the specific guidelines, and I will be happy to take any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing those recommendations for governments. Ahora voy a cambiar a español.
I'll switch back to Spanish now. After this section, where we have had the presentations, I remind you that you can type your questions to presenters in the Q&A box, and you can also put comments in a chat box. Now we move to the second section of our webinar, which is precisely a panel to listen about some cases or situations we are facing in the region. And now I'll switch back to English.
She is an advocacy officer at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition and the lead coordinator at the HCC's youth arm. She not only drives work in the area of healthy food policy, but mental health and tobacco control, with the organization's most recent tobacco control efforts focused on preventing e-cigarette use among the Caribbean youth. So Daniel, welcome, and I'm glad that you can join me to co-moderate this international discussion. So before jumping into asking our other panelists to join us for this discussion, I would like to ask a couple of questions to Daniel for us to get to know a little bit and get familiar with the situation and the context in the Caribbean. So Daniel, if you could please share with us, how is the tobacco industry targeting children and youth in the Caribbean? What have been the major challenges that encountering the interference strategies that we see in the Caribbean? If you could share that with us, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Diana, and to PAHO, CTFK, and Corporate Accountability for the opportunity to share, and of course, Diana, to co-moderate with you. So in terms of what we're seeing on the ground, it's the same old playbook. We're seeing industry targeting vulnerable children through school sponsorships. Carreras, which is a subsidiary of British American Tobacco, has facilitated school sponsorships for years in Jamaica. In 2023, they issued a record of 90 scholarships, which were valued at approximately 20 million Jamaica dollars. We're also seeing industry in the culture. So the tobacco industry has become a key actor in carnival celebrations where they promote vapes, often using young women as vape promoters in parties and on digital platforms. And this alignment with our cultural traditions and normalization of these products in spaces where children and young people frequent is deeply concerning and amplifies the need for comprehensive bans on tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. And because some of our countries do not have regulations in place, we are seeing promotion and sale of products via social media and the recent introduction of product delivery services, which also makes these products easily accessible. We've also seen an introduction and promotion of e-cigarettes under the banner of Smoke-Free Caribbean, leveraging the harm reduction concept as a strategy to promote their newest products. And this is best exemplified in the title of a sponsored article in the local news in Trinidad and Tobago, Tobacco Harm Reduction, the New Frontier in Support of Public Health. We've also seen these companies institute recycling initiatives. And so some of the challenges, Diana, in the Caribbean, policymakers have competing priorities and are acting within resource-constrained settings. And this has resulted in insufficient implementation of the FCTC, a lack of enforcement, and insufficient funds allocated for monitoring. We've also seen insufficient and irregular data collection, and especially on upcoming trends such as e-cigarette use. And so there's limited data to illustrate in real time the extent of this challenge. We've also seen some limitations of current legislation, as many current legislations do not include regulations around ends and other novel products. Unfortunately, there's limited fiscal space, and so industry is seen as an economic savior. Just think about the scholarships that I just mentioned. A lot of health-harming industries step in to fill in these economic gaps. We've also seen weak governance structures. There's an absence of conflict of interest policies and mechanisms to address private sector engagement in policymaking spaces, which create space for industry to have the ear of policymakers. And last but not least, little to no funding for CSOs to play the watchdog role that has been mentioned so far in the webinar, to put pressure on governments and to be active agents in policy development.
Thank you, Daniel, for sharing that with us. And now I also would like to ask you a second question. Given the limitations that you just have noted now, we know the Caribbean has made the strides over the last few decades to counter the tobacco industry interference. But what strategies have you employed? What strategies do you think are still necessary and are still needed, considering the specific context that we have in the Caribbean?
Thanks, Diana. And to start, we've had some inspiring leaders, Minister Fenton Ferguson and Minister Christopher Tufton from Jamaica. They have both led on tobacco control regulations and legislation, respectively. We've been able to leverage and grow civil society champions, Deb Chen and Barbara McGaw. They have ensured that despite significant funding challenges, there's an ongoing focus on tobacco control in the region, including supporting advancement of national legislation and mentoring up-and-coming youth tobacco champions. Huge thank you to them. The Trinidad and Tobago Cancer Society has also remained a prominent figure in tobacco control advocacy, as seen in their recent campaign that focused predominantly on vaping. We have also been very lucky to have very valuable partnerships. The Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids has provided numerous grants to support tobacco control advocacy in the Caribbean. We've also seen stepping up of health-neutral companies like Scotiabank in Trinidad and Tobago, and they have come forward to support tobacco control efforts in collaboration with the Trinidad and Tobago Cancer Society. And this kind of sponsorship is really critical given the limited fiscal space which tobacco industry and other health-harming products brands attempt to fill, as I mentioned earlier. We've also seen really valuable partnerships between civil society organizations and PAHO and CARFA, which have resulted in numerous benefits, including the development of resources, vaping among adolescents and youth in the Caribbean, one that we would have launched last year, and numerous resources related to a smoke-free Caribbean. And these resources aim to support multi-sectoral action for smoke-free legislation, and I'll include some links that we can share in the chat. We've also seen youth engagement in tobacco control. So I had the privilege of attending the Johns Hopkins Tobacco Control Leadership Program in February, which was an incredibly rewarding experience. And one of the highlights was learning about CREA and the fantastic work that they're leading to ensure that youth voices are heard in tobacco control efforts, among other health issues. And through our collective aim to increase alignment with the Caribbean and Latin American partners, Doriel Quinton, who is the project assistant at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, was invited by CREA and the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids to attend their recent summit, which we just heard about. So these sorts of capacity building opportunities are critical in fueling future tobacco control efforts in the Caribbean. And lastly, we have been able to contribute resources, as I mentioned before, and capacity building opportunities for youth. We would have held, the Healthy Caribbean Coalition would have held Let's Talk About Marketing to Children webinar, which aimed to build capacity of youth health advocates to identify and challenge industry tactics to market health harming products to children. And Doriel Quinton, who I mentioned earlier, she created the Youth Tobacco Control Portal, which is featured on the Healthy Caribbean Coalition's website. And it includes information on tobacco control policies and also provides resources for youth advocates who are interested in this space. And Diana, just to end, given the unrelenting focus of the tobacco industry on fostering a new generation of users, the role of youth in engaging and informing tobacco control advocacy is paramount.
Thank you so much, Daniel. So I will give the floor to you so you continue the discussion with the other panelists.
Wonderful. Thanks, Diana. And it's my pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from our other panelists. It is my pleasure to introduce Carlos Jimenez from Red Papas. He is a dedicated professional with a master's degree in social organizations management and extensive experience in integrating the public and private sectors through socially aimed projects. Currently, he is the coordinator of the Project for the Prevention of Tobacco Control Consumption in Children and Adolescents in Red Papas. Carlos, welcome. What marketing tactics have the tobacco industry and its allies utilized in Colombia to specifically target children and youth?
Ok, voy a responder en español para que, por favor, la traducción lo tenga en cuenta. Muchas gracias, Daniel.
Yes, I'll answer in Spanish. Thank you very much, Daniel, for your introduction. And thank you all for this space. In Colombia, the most employed tactic by the industry is promoting product not subject to regulation through physical and virtual channels. As to the physical channels, promotional exhibition in points of sale is very common. For example, for electronic products, it has been evidenced that this is placed at the visual reach of children and adolescents, and in most situations, these products that are harmful share the space with food products, which leads to confusion and makes these products more accessible. And we insist these products are harmful. What happens? The tobacco industry reinforces this with a supply, as you know, of designed and also attractive flavors and smells. That as to the physical channels. And now into virtual channels, the presence in social media fosters disinformation and the transmission of messages in an accessible way to the youth and children. But fortunately, in Colombia, we already have a law that extends tobacco control measures to electronic cigarettes. We will counter all these type of tobacco tactics that are common not only in Colombia, but in the region as a whole.
Excellent. Thank you, Carlos. And what lessons can we learn from the successful campaign led by Red Papas to protect children and youth in Colombia from the tobacco industry and its allies? We understand that your campaigns have involved advocating for the expansion of the ban on taps, as well as other tobacco control measures to encompass ends. And also, how did parents and educators contribute to the success of this campaign?
Para nosotros, la ciudadanía debe contar con acceso a información veraz y con
For us,
herramientas
citizens have to have access to truthful information and to have right to health to all inhabitants, but especially we need to protect this right in children and adolescents. So the joint promotion with RICPAPAS and SCOs and academia is essential for different measures of advocacy and others. For example, through our campaign, we transmit messages that strengthen the citizens, giving tools to mothers, fathers, and caregivers. And in our campaign, we emphasize first the harmfulness of these type of products. And second, we reflect that there's a very aggressive marketing strategy by tobacco industries addressed to children and adolescents. And three, we see what is the interference practice of the industry in our country. For example, with regard to the latest tobacco control measures against electronic data, the most recent data at the country level generated alarm, but also spurred mobilization. 1 of 5 children between 10 and 17 years of age have consumed electronic cigarettes. And in our country, 14 years of age is the average age to use tobacco. And we see that it is necessary that the country have regulation for these devices that, as I said, is not covered by the law. So we also report the interference by industry. We reported this to our Congress, thanks to our network of partners in our Congress, but also through some tools such as microsites and then we address cases there. Thank you very much, Carlos, for sharing your enriching experience in Colombia generated by civil society and how it has involved not only children and youth of both sexes, but also a secondary experience. We would like to say that it's fathers, mothers, and educators that are involved. Civil society has also played an important role in Colombia. Now, I would like to introduce Congresswoman Carolina Giraldo. She, together with Red Papas, they earned the 2024 World No Tobacco Day prizes. Carolina Giraldo Rovera chairs the Legal Commission of Women Equity in the Colombian Congress. She is a historian and in Congress, she has promoted the law that regulates the use of e-cigarettes, and she is the author of the bill to increase taxes on electronic nicotine and nicotine-less products. Thank you very much, Congresswoman, for being with us today. First of all, Carolina, I would like to ask you, what do you believe? What do you think Colombia's experiences with the law expanding the ban on advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, along with other tobacco control measures to include ENDS, ENDS? What can this offer to other countries? What lessons learned would you share for Latin America and the Caribbean? What lessons learned would you share with Congress members from other countries interested in policies to safeguard children and youth from the tobacco industry and its allies? Go ahead, Congresswoman, please. Well, good morning. Special greetings for everybody. It's an honor to share this webinar with you and to learn from each of the very significant and experiences that have been presented today. These spaces are very enriching and important for people just like I, which we are working at the legislative level to promote the agenda on behalf of public health, especially in Colombia, my country. For the first time this semester, it was possible to have a law, as Carlos mentioned, in Colombia that regulates vaping users. This is important because for many years we had that intention, but this had not come to fruition. The last time that we had a law to increase taxes on tobacco products in Colombia was in 2016. And after that, we hadn't had any type of regulation advancing toward our goal. But this year, we achieved something fundamental. That is to say, the sale of vaping products to minors was prohibited for the first time. It's incredible that until now that was not in the law, but we need to have this new law imposes some regulations to control the vaping devices promotion and publicity. This regulation puts on a level playing basis traditional cigarettes and electronic cigarette products. So these products don't have different legislation, but the same legislation and the same regulation covering both traditional cigarettes and electronic cigarettes. And some of the experiences that this bill left us, first of all, for us, it has been very important to work hand in hand with CSOs such as Red Papas, Anna's Foundation, and other entities, and also together with the academia. Having effective data about what is happening is very important because this helps us to promote better laws. Recently, there was a study in the country that said that 25% of vaping device users were minors, and this allows us to have good arguments to present this to the Senate or the chamber floor. So in our relationship with CSOs and academia is a great learning. And second, the learning of all this experience, what happened with the interference of tobacco industry, which we saw, and all of this was also thanks to the coordination with CSOs and with with media. This allowed us to reveal that legislators were being invited to Switzerland to learn about foreign experiences related to the tobacco industry. And that was precisely when we were processing these bills, both of that of regulated vaping devices and the increase of taxes to the tobacco industry, and to establish taxes for the first time on vaping products. This allowed us to see what was happening, and this was very important because even though we thought that the tobacco industry wanted to put a stop to the regulation, but it had the opposite effect. This has accelerated the debate and approval of this bill. Oftentimes, the Congress people are not aware of the WHO FCTC, and this is another important lesson. This is a tool that has to be promoted. We have an anti-lobby law in Colombia. So we don't have anything to do with the tobacco industry. We as legislators have to address public health in the citizenry in general and of minors in particular. Thank you very much, Carolina. Yes, spaces such as these allow us to work to address those knowledge gaps that affect not only the public in general, the civil society, but also in decision makers, as you mentioned. So thank you very much for sharing these lessons learned in Colombia. Now, Carolina, I would like to ask you if you could comment about what was the motivation that you had to submit the bill about taxes on tobacco and nicotine products. What do you think that this law contributes in particular to policies to protect children and youth from the tobacco industry strategies that focus these vulnerable groups? What can you tell us in that respect? Well, as I said a few minutes ago, since 2016, we have not had a law to increase taxes on tobacco, and right now this is not regulated at all. I'm referring to vaping, device taxes that are not taxed so far. When I joined the Congress, we had the opportunity in the middle of fiscal reform, we had the opportunity to submit these proposals to increase taxes on cigarettes and to establish taxes on vaping devices. But the tobacco industry called and stalled this process, but now we have a bill that we will take forward. And what we're saying is that thanks to this bill, as you know, by increasing taxes and increasing prices, this reduces consumption and use of these products.
We would be saving at least $6.5 billion to the health budget. But in addition, we would be collecting about 1 million pesos for public health in each case. So we would be increasing the public health budget. So here in Colombia, anything that is collected from tobacco taxes is used for public health. Why? Because public health has to have priority in the agenda of the country and the countries. And then there's a personal motivation to do this. When I was a kid, I hated to see my grandparents smoke. My grandfather smoked, but my grandma did not. So I think all of these things touches us through personal experiences. So this is a bill about a tax levy, and we were able to make sure that there was a regulation about the advertising, promotion, and sponsorship and labeling. But then now we are touching the pockets of people. And then, of course, that's a harder struggle because you touch my pocket and my money, and that's a harder struggle. So we need support from the authorities. Yes, we have had this support, and we hope that we will continue to have it. And we are sure that we will forge ahead with success with this project. Thank you so much, Carolina, for all your excellent presentations and experience and answers. And this is wonderful to hear about the success that you have had in Colombia to expand these efforts against the tobacco products. And now you are also working in electronic products and in electronic nicotine delivery systems and non-delivery systems to make sure that there's limited accessibility of these products for children and adolescents. And congratulations to Colombia, and please go ahead with this project. And to finish our panel, I would like to welcome our next panelist, André Luis Oliveira da Silva. He is a specialist in regulation and the General Director of Product Inspection in Anvisa, Brazil. Anvisa is the agency for health surveillance in Brazil. He is an expert pro bono expert of the Framework Convention Secretariat, and also especially in the implementations of Articles 9 and 10, which has to do with emissions of products, tobacco products. He is a graduate in biological sciences, master in occupational health, and also PhD by the Osvaldo Cruz Foundation. Thank you so much, Andre Luis Oliveira da Silva, for being here with us. And now I will ask one first question. We know that recently Brazil approved a resolution to strengthen the production of emergent products of nicotine and tobacco. This existed since 2009, and within the framework of this achievement, what strategies of the tobacco industry are in effect to manipulate the youth? Do you in Brazil have some strategies to work on this? Please go ahead.
Muito obrigado, Diana. Vou responder em português.
Thank you, Diana. I'm going to be answering in Portuguese.
Acho que vou até
I am going to change the questions so that people understand this better.
porque se é que podemos chamar de estratégia,
If we can call it strategies, we heard that the electronic cigarettes, we classify them differently than in most countries. Some countries in Latin America have classification that's similar to us. For our regulations, e-cigarettes are electronic cigarettes, warm tobacco products, and hybrids, those that use solids and liquids for their use. The first problem that we saw, and I'm going to share my screen, were the allegations that these products are... Can you see, Diana, my screen? Yes, yes, we can see your screen. So the first thing that we heard or we discussed whether these products were safer than conventional cigarettes or other tobacco products. We had seen that there was a distortion or a misunderstanding of the definitions of risk situations, damage, and of course, that was used for the dissemination of these products as a safe product. But the allegation that these products are 95% safer than cigarettes, it's a number that we do not accept. There's no scientific value when we look at the origin of those numbers. But when we looked at epidemiological data, people suggest that we just looked at biomarkers, bioindicators, disposition or effect. The industry always says that regulating agencies have to look at concentration of certain components in the blood or urine of the user. But when we look at that data, the products seem to be much safer. However, when we looked at epidemiological data, the effect of these products on the populations, and some frighten us because the data came very quickly. So myocardial infarctions, AVCs, metabolic syndrome, strokes, the data suggest that the damage is similar to the damage caused by cigarettes. And for COPD and asthma and other lung diseases, we see that the issue of the safety of these products, that they really are less harmful than cigarettes, it's minimally questionable because risk does not include only the potential harm the product may cause. I always use plutonium and chicken salt. Plutonium is forbidden, very restricted, although is the most toxic radioactive element. But there are very few cases of people that die because of plutonium, because the use is restricted. Very few people use it. So the conclusion is that the risk for human beings that do not work in the industry is very low. Very few possibilities of getting contaminated by that. But in kitchen salt or cooking salt, the risk is much higher and is one of the most important causes of death in the world. But it's so non-toxic that we eat it, and it's essential in certain concentrations. Animal studies also have demonstrated that, and his sound is being cut off. I'm sorry, the interpreter apologizes. Some of these products make alterations in the DNA of the person, which suggests that these products cannot be deemed much less harmful than cigarettes. Also, the nicotine salts are less irritating and allows for the creation of products in concentrations that we had never thought of before we had this technology. Nicotine salt is less irritating. So trying to be didactic, and of course, this is an example that's really a fantasy, but just to show you how it works, is as if I put a lot of salt in your food. At some point, you are going to say, no, I don't want any more because I cannot eat this. It's too salty. But if I invent a substance that blocks your capacity to perceive the taste of salt, after a time, I would put as much salt as I wanted in your food, and you would have greater tolerance. So I can have concentrations of nicotines that conventional products and older e-cigarettes could not do because the user himself rejected. And the kinetic of the nicotine salts is very similar of the nicotine kinetic in cigarettes, and which is different from old versions of e-cigarettes. Now, e-cigarettes are very efficient mechanisms to deliver nicotine, as efficient as conventional cigarettes. While I talk about more nicotine, the one some vaping is 10,000 puffs, and they can do it, use that in a week. And that means 50 packs of cigarettes, 1,000 cigarettes we see in that e-cigarette. Very high number, levels of nicotines we see only in people that have been smoking for decades. Here, we're talking about young people, and 10,000 puffs is a very high level of nicotine. Now, the market is showing products with 25,000 puffs. What does this mean?
Eu proíbo produto com
I
tanta nicotina.
forbid products with that amount of nicotine. No. Again, the interpreter really apologizes, but his sound is cutting. This is a product that causes addiction. And now he's gone.
Aqueles que nunca fumaram antes.
Those who never smoked before creates tolerance in the user, and people need more and more nicotine. So the market is now is selling products with higher levels of nicotine. And this addiction in young people, we do not have any established protocols to treat this addiction. So the young person who is addicted to this product has no therapeutic possibilities except stopping abstinence. And in Brazil was criticized by the industry because we fact that we forbade the products would mean stimulate consumption. But when we looked at Brazil compared with Canada, UK, and the US, countries that regulate but also authorize the sale of these products, it's 44% higher in England, 37% in the US and Canada. In Brazil, it's only 16.8, the prevalence of ever vaping by young people. So forbidding the product was effective in Brazil. That started in 2009, and the results are there. We still have a lot of work ahead of us. The prevalence is very low in Brazil among young people. So forbidding the products protected the younger people. Another example here, the industry says that we have to follow the regulation in developed countries such as the US, UK, and the European Union. But when we look at the results of the Brazilian tobacco control policies, we see that Brazilians smoked a lot. And in reality, the Brazilian smoker, the Brazilian addicts to smoke have a very high level of addiction to nicotine. When the Brazilians are addicted to nicotine, the level is very high. So the success of our policies demonstrate that we may not be wrong as we forbid the use of these products. When we forbade the use of e-cigarettes, unfortunately, again, his sound is completely off.
Creo que estamos teniendo un poco de problemas con la conexión.
Ah, perdão.
Sí.
¿Quer que eu volte, Diana?
No, sí, tal vez podemos ir cerrando para pasar. Tenemos una pregunta adicional para un panelista. Muchísimas gracias.
Yes, maybe we should be closing now. We have a question for a panelist.
In Brazil, these products are gateway to other products. Young people that smoke e-cigarettes end up smoking cigarettes. Also, the flavors, cooling flavors, are a serious problem. And there are other strategies, Diana, that we monitor, from the use of digital influencers, an attempt to put pressure on our agency Anvisa by the industry, but we had the fundamental support of all the medical associations in Brazil. They supported that we ban the use of electronic cigarettes. The National Association of Medical Professionals and several others supported our decision. The Association of Pediatricians.
Por ahora mil disculpas, estamos teniendo.
Andre, we apologize. We have a lot of problems with the connection. We cannot follow you with the interruption so that the interpreters can do their work. Thank you so much for sharing the experience of Brazil. I think this is very useful so that we can share this in our region. We see that the tobacco industry used many false arguments based in the evidence they have, and there's a conflict of interest and the success and the lessons learned from Brazil has allowed us to see, to look for scientific evidence free of any commercial interest. I think in the last part that I was able to hear, I know that Brazil had any other important actors such as the civil society, and that is a lesson learned for decision makers, especially in regulatory policies for new and emerging nicotine and tobacco products. Thank you so much, Andre, for having shared the valuable experience from Brazil. And now to finish this panel, we have a couple of minutes, and I don't know if Congresswoman Carolina Giraldo is with us. If you could please let us know if you are still here, please turn on your camera. We have a question. Let's see if we can have Congresswoman Carolina Giraldo. Thank you, Carolina. We would like to ask you if you could please answer this question that we have in the question and answer box. The question says, thank you for your interest in history, ma'am. And I ask, which is the reaction of the tobacco industry when you increase taxes? Obviously, when we talk about tax increases, the tobacco industry, we know that they are against this type of regulation. However, they do not do this explicitly. They don't issue a communique saying we're opposed to tax increases. No, it doesn't happen that way, but we know that they go talk to congressmen. They have people who have great influence in the presidential palace, and they have key people that can go talk to different decision makers. So that's the way it is. That's the way they move. And then on the other hand, we are trying to promote differentiated taxes for cigarettes and for vaping products. So this is another objective that we have, that somehow or other the narrative has been, yes, we need some type of regulation for vaping products, but we have to take into consideration what it is, the strategy of risk reduction. And then based on that, we want to make sure that regulation has standards under cigarettes, and that is one of the purposes of the industry in promoting this regulation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel, for joining me in co-moderating this panel. And also, I want to thank all the panelists that joined us today. Thank you so much for sharing these experiences. Daniel Dorado, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Diana, y a todos los y las oradoras del panel.
Thank you so much to all the speakers. With this, we are reaching the end of our seminar. There's a lot of topics. They are complex topics, but the voices that we have heard today have clearly expressed the objectives and the conclusions that we wanted to reach. The strategies for interference of the tobacco industry to attract this segment of the population formed by children and adolescents. They do deserve special protection at the international and national levels under all the laws. And then, of course, we have an urgent call for decision makers and all the civil society members and intergovernmental organizations to face this. We have to say, stop this interference. For us, for corporate accountability, it is an honor to join our efforts to yours. And we know that we are many leaders in the social and civil society in our region in this effort, and they are all working to the great efforts by PAHO. Thank you so much for the invitation to coordinate and to participate in this seminar, and we will be ready to continue to collaborate. And with this, I will give the floor to Patricia Butowski. Thank you so much, Daniel. Yes, I would like to thank you on behalf of Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. I would like to thank PAHO for having invited us to organize this webinar on social corporate accountability. It has been an honor to participate here. Thank you to all the panelists, to all the participants. I coincide with Daniel in all the conclusions. I think that all of these strategies by the tobacco industry to attract children and adolescents are the same in all the countries of our region, and they are the same around the world. So I join to what Daniel in saying that civil society and us, we will have to keep on working to make sure that we continue to protect children and adolescents. And with this, I believe we will say goodbye. Diana, I don't know if you want to say anything else, Diana. Thank you, all colleagues, for having organized this event. It has been one of the events that has had more responses, and it is a pleasure to have had all the colleagues from the region in this webinar. Thank you so much, everybody.